nonprofit it was literally my dream job. It was helping connect farmers and their extra resources with folks who were hungry. I was going to help organize this program, do community organizing stuff with this nonprofit that cares about environmental conservation. Y'all, this is my jam. I love like food justice and sustainable agriculture and like protecting the environment. Like this was my dream job. I was like, yes, I want to take it. I went and I interviewed. My office would be in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I graduated from the University of North Carolina, and I think there is one place on earth that is as close to heaven as you'll ever be, and that is Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I would have an office in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. My name would be on a door in an office in Chapel Hill. I was like, this is my dream come true. And I was headed on the airplane back to Nashville, Tennessee, and this guy asked me beside me, he's like, what do you do? And I said, well, right now I'm a pastor, but I just applied for this job I'm really excited about, so I think I'm going to start working for this nonprofit. And he said, I don't know why I'm sitting beside you, but I'm here to tell you that I think God is asking you to keep being a pastor. He was like, the way you've talked to me and what all you said, I think God is asking you to still be a pastor. And I came home and I told Chris, I said, I'm going to call this job offer that is exactly what I want to do, and I'm going to tell him no. I'm going to say no, because while it's tempting and enticing, the salary's where I want it, the job is exactly what I want, God is asking me to be a pastor, and I'm going to have to say no to this temptation, to this thing that I feel like may be awesome and amazing. I feel like God is asking me to say no. About the same time, I get a phone call from a friend of mine. She's a woman. She's been praying for a long time, a really long time. She wanted to meet a guy who's like handsome and loved Jesus and just traveled the world. She like had this long list of things she wanted for this guy in her life. And she calls me. She said, Erica, I met this guy at work, and he's handsome. He loves Jesus. He's volunteering at this ministry downtown. He's awesome. I think he's great. And I was like, that's awesome. He's like, she said, but there's one thing. And I'm like, oh, you always find one thing that you don't like about somebody. Like, don't even bother to tell me. But I didn't say that. I almost said, don't even bother to tell me what it is that's holding you back from dating this guy, from this relationship with this guy. I said, go ahead, tell me what it is. And she said, Erica, his relationship's really bad, but he's still married. He wants an out. He wants to be divorced, but he's still married to this girl, and I have to say no. And I'm like, yeah, you have to say no, right? But at that moment, her voice cracked, and she was like, I don't know that I will ever find a meaningful relationship. Saying no was absolutely the right thing to do, but in that moment I heard the difficulty of having to say no to what may be the only relationship she would ever experience in her life that meant something and was what she wanted it to be. She knew she had to say no. She knew that was the right decision, but I heard in her how hard it was to say no. 2 weeks after this, I'm not kidding y'all, 2 weeks after this, one of my friends comes and sits down in my living room with Chris and I. He's sitting on the couch, and he's like literally, like you can see the weight of the world on his shoulders. And he looks at Chris and I and he says, I have to quit my job. I have to say no to going into the office every single day for this company. I love this company. I love what we're doing. But I know for a fact that this guy who is qualified for a promotion has been passed over 3 times because of his identity as a man who is gay. I know that he was passed over 3 times for that reason, and I have to say no to being a part of a company that discriminates against people for those kinds of things. I have to say no to this. I remember looking at him, I was like, you have a 6-month-old son. Can you figure out maybe something else to do? Like he's like, I've talked to my boss. I've had the conversations. I have to say no to continuing to be a part of this discrimination. And he turned his letter in. He didn't get a severance package. He didn't get an unemployment package. And he came home to his wife, who's a teacher, and his 6-month-old son because he had to say no. I'm here to tell you this morning that sometimes saying no is going to be the hardest thing that you have to do. But God will not waste you saying a faithful no. I love preaching about yeses. I love saying, yes, sign up for that volunteer opportunity. Yes, think about that new beginning. Yes, think about families in new and different ways. Think about fostering and adopting. Say yes. I love telling you all to say yes. But this morning, God is asking some of us to say no to some things so that we can say yes to something that really matters. We're looking at a story about a man named Joseph. God set Joseph apart from the very beginning of his life to be a wise and courageous and discerning leader. People looked to Joseph his entire life to make good and right and wise decisions, and his brothers hated him for it. I talked about this last week. They betrayed him, they sold him into slavery, and he's headed down to slavery. And I want you guys to listen to this story. It's found in Genesis chapter 39. We're going to read the whole chapter again. I'm sorry, these are long stories, but it's so good this morning. Genesis chapter 39. I want you to listen to Joseph's no, and I want you to hear what God does not to waste our no's. Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of the Pharaoh's officials, so this guy's a big deal. His name's Potiphar. He's a really big and important guy. He's a captain of the guard. He bought him from the Ishmaelites, so he paid for him to be his slave who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. Did y'all hear that? The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. Even in this not great situation, Joseph was prospering, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in the eyes of Potiphar, and he became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household. Joseph's in charge of everything. He's this wise, really discerning, great leader. And he entrusted everything in his care. Potiphar entrusted everything in his care and everything that he owned to Joseph. From the time he put Joseph in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. Things are going great. The blessing of the Lord was on everything that Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. The crops are going crazy. Things are working out super smooth in the house. Everything is going great. So Potiphar left everything that he had in Joseph's care with Joseph in charge. He didn't concern himself with anything except the food that he ate. He knew Joseph was the right leader. Now, Joseph was well-built and handsome. And after a while, Potiphar's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." But Joseph refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he's owned, he's entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife." Listen to this. "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? I'm going to say no, because this is not the right thing for me to do." And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day, he went into the house to attend his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. So it's just the two of them. They're inside by themselves. She caught him by his cloak, and she said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand, and he ran out of the house. He ran away from the thing, and he said no really loud and clear, right? When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to be with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She told a lie on him. She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home, until Potiphar came home, and she told him the story. "That Hebrew slave that you brought to us came to make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me." He burned with anger. This man that he entrusted everything to had betrayed him. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison at the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Did y'all hear that? This lie turned into him throwing Joseph in the prison. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favors in the eye of the prison warden. Do you hear this? God says, "Joseph, nothing will be wasted. You doing the right thing will not be wasted." Yes, you are in prison, but these guys saw favor in Joseph, and they pulled him up to a great position of power, even in the prison. The warden put Joseph in charge of all of those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Joseph's no mattered. It was not wasted. Some of us have said no, and we've had to experience the repercussions from it, right? We've said no, and we've experienced rejection and disapproval and cut salaries and all kinds of other things, right? Sometimes our no is going to lead us into a place that feels a lot like a prison, but that was not wasted. That was not wasted. Joseph found favor in the eyes of the prison warden and was lifted up to a piece of power. The hardest decisions that some of you are going to have to make in your life is saying no. Is saying no when there are no other options on the horizon. Saying no when there's no increase in salary for you doing that. Saying no even when things look happy and joyous and fulfilling on the other side. Saying no because there might be something better. Saying no to the timing right now because God may have something better for you in the future. Your no will not be wasted. That is the story of God. Your no will not be wasted. I now stand here in Tampa, Florida, 5 years later as a pastor. I love my job. I love every single person in here. I love our city and our community, and I love the way our church is busy impacting this world, showing the world what it looks like to follow Jesus and be generous, showing the world that we have a deep and abiding purpose that gives us joy and goodness. I love being a pastor. And on Thursday night, you know what I got to do? I got to stand and hand out produce from this community. I handed it out to people who were hungry at the Gandy Civic Center free grocery store. Alongside some of you were there volunteering on Thursday night. I got to be a part of making sure people in our community had food that they needed. We are taking a part of making sure the environment is protected and we're doing sustainable things. I'm getting to live out the purpose that God had for me in a way that was beautiful. And if I would have said yes to that opportunity 5 years ago, I wouldn't be standing here literally living my dream life as your pastor and as your leader. My friend is living in an intentional community. That means there's 12 folks between the age of 30 and 35 in Seattle, and they are serving the homeless downtown in Seattle. She works, they share their money, they're doing this really intentional life together, they eat together, they serve the community around them, and she's like, if I would have said yes to that relationship, it would have ruined everything that God had for me here. Is she married? No. Did life wind up exactly like she wanted it to? No, but she's in absolutely this meaningful community that's impacting the world around her. God did not waste her no. God did not waste her faithful no. My friend Chris in Nashville, Tennessee is working for a Fortune 50 company. He's doing amazing things in Nashville. His salary is awesome. They're leaders in their church. In Franklin, they're helping continue to train business leaders how to not discriminate, how to be more inclusive, how to be more diverse. They're doing awesome work in Nashville. And if he would have said yes to continuing to work in a job that was discriminating, it would have changed the entire trajectory of his life. I want you to hear me. Your no right now is not going to mean immediate happiness and goodness. Your no right now might not even mean things work out dreamy and perfect for you. My life isn't perfect. I'm living my dream life, but it's not perfect. Your no may not mean that, but it will mean that God can use it for something very good. Joseph went to prison, if he wouldn't have been in prison, the Pharaoh would have never seen how good of a leader he was. Pharaoh rescued him from prison and put him in leadership over the entire country. And he ran this entire program helping people survive from a famine. The entire country was blessed by Joseph's no, so that he could say yes and be in the right place at the right time. Do y'all hear me? Nothing is wasted. If God is calling you to say no to something today, it is because it will open up the most powerful yes you may ever say in your entire life. Your no will matter. But maybe you're sitting here today and you're like, I understand I need to say no, but how in the world did Joseph have the power, have the ability to say no? And I think our story today shows us three things that Joseph was able to do really well. The first is focus. You want to know the reason you make bad decisions? Top 3 reasons. The number 3 reason people make bad decisions and they get involved in things they shouldn't say and they say yes to things they should say no to is because they're tired. They're absolutely tired. They're tired of making 9 million decisions. They're not getting enough sleep at night, and they're doing everything else that they're not supposed to do. They are fatigued and tired. And you know what? Joseph, he was rested. He spent time with the Lord. It said 3 times in our thing, the Lord is with him. He spent time resting, so he wasn't fatigued. He was able to focus. The second thing that is the reason that you make a bad decision is because you're too emotional. So you get angry and you react out of the anger. You get sad and you act out of this sadness. Your emotions control everything in your life, and there's absolutely no stability. That's the second reason people make bad decisions. And the third reason, the top reason, this is the top 3. The top reason people make bad decisions is because they are multitasking and distracted. They are doing 20,000 things because they're not focused on the one thing God has asked them to do. What did Joseph say? What did Joseph say every time she asked him to do something he wasn't supposed to? What did he say? No, I'm in charge of this house. I'm supposed to lead over this house. This is my job. He was absolutely focused on God's purpose for his life. If you want to be able to say no to things that don't matter so you can say yes to the things that really do matter, you've got to be focused on God's purpose for your life. Absolutely keyed in. If God's called you to be a doctor, be a good one. If God's called you to be a mom, be a good one. If God's called you to be a banker, be a good one. If God's called you to be a volunteer at the Gandy Sixer, be a good one. And focus on doing that in that moment really well. Be focused, because that will allow you to say no to everything else that's going to come to you on Thursday night or what's going to happen at noon on Monday. That helps you say no to those things so you can say yes to the things that really matter. It's what Joseph did, right? He focused on what it was God was calling him to do. Focus. The second thing is to find joy right where you are. Would a relationship, when there are no relationships on the horizon, would that have made him happy? Perhaps. But he found joy in doing what God had asked him to do right where he was. I find joy in leading this house, is what Joseph said. Find joy right where you are. What task has God put right in front of you? Find joy in it. This week, as I was writing this point, find joy right where you are, Chris is like, can I have some help with the dishes? I'm like, absolutely not. I do not like doing the dishes. And then I was like, oh, why don't I find joy in what's right in front of me? And Chris and I wash the dishes together, and we're laughing and washing dishes. Find joy right where you are, because you know what I said no to was scrolling through Facebook and Instagram and getting jealous about everybody going to Zion National Park because I couldn't find joy in the dirty dishes in my sink right where I was. God, in order to say no to things that don't matter, Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff all the time, instead of saying no to the things, so you can say no to things that don't matter, you can say yes to things that really matter. Washing dishes with my husband on a Tuesday night was what really mattered in that moment. Find joy right where you are, and you can say no to things that don't really matter, so you can have a yes for the things that do matter. And the third thing is face every day believing that God is actually with you. 3 times in this chapter we heard the Lord is with you. The Lord was with Joseph. He believed that. He was able to say no to things that don't matter and trust because he believed God had his back. How do you live your day-to-day life? What does it look like when you go in to meet with your boss? What does it look like when you drop your kids off? Do you believe the Lord has your back? God is with you. God is with you right where you are. If you want to be able to say no to things that don't matter and yes to things that really do matter, believe that God is with you. Believe that God is with you. Believe that God is speaking to you. Believe that God is opening things around you to show you what you need to say yes to and what you need to say no to. If you want to be able to say no to things that don't matter and yes to the things that really do matter, focus. Find joy right where you are. This is what Joseph did. And believe that God is with you. The Lord, listen to me clearly. The Lord is with you. And if you are calling to say, if someone's asking you to say no to something that doesn't really matter, it is so you can say yes to the things that really do matter. Now, while we're all thinking about what all things we need to say no to so we can say yes to things that really matter, I need you to know there is one thing you absolutely need to say yes to, and that is God's way, God's plan, God's purpose for your life through Jesus Christ. It is very important for you to say no to things that don't matter, but there might be somebody in here today who has never ever said yes to Jesus, to the purpose that God has for your life through living for Jesus. Say yes right now, because if you want to be able to say no to things that don't matter, say yes to Jesus, whose grace and love and mercy will spend every single ounce of its energy pulling you in the right ways of life. I didn't say easy, I didn't say perfect, I didn't say dreamy, but his ways will pull you into the right ways of life. This morning, there are things you need to say no to, but make sure you say yes to Jesus, who has a good and right purpose for your life. Some of you this morning might be the first time you've said yes to that Jesus. I want you to make sure not to leave here without talking to me or Chris before you leave, because there are some next steps that you need to take, and we can't wait to help you continue to say yes on this journey. There are some of you sitting in here who said yes to Jesus a long time ago, but you've gotten really used to saying no to Jesus, and you need to say yes to Jesus again this morning. So you can say no to things that don't matter. You want to know the best thing about Jesus is all those things that you've said yes to that's got you off the path you need to be on. God, through Jesus Christ, has forgiven you for that and is ready to pick you up and put you on a path headed to a purpose that'll give you life and life abundant like you've never experienced before. So if you're sitting here this morning and you've said no to Jesus for a long time after a season of yes, you have a new opportunity this morning to say, yes, Jesus, I want to follow where you lead. I'm ready to say no to the things that don't matter so I can say yes to the things that really matter. And there are some in here this morning who are right in the middle of saying the hardest no's that you've ever said in your life to things that don't matter, and trying really hard to continue living on that path. I want you to know that you are loved, and I want you to hear the Lord is with you. Keep saying no to the things that don't matter so you can say yes to the things that really do matter. The band's going to come up here, and they're going to sing a song. I'm going to lead us in communion. Sean, can you pass out communion? I actually don't have communion with me this morning, but you're going to get a little cup of juice. Every single worship service, we have an opportunity in every single worship service to say yes to following through on what it is God's calling us to do. It's a moment where we call it communion. It's a moment where we really intentionally commune with God and spend time with God. And so in a few moments, you're going to get a cup, and it has some bread and some juice in it. And we're just going to take some time to spend with God. On the night, thank you. That's awesome. On the night before Jesus gave his life up for us, before he said yes to how much he loved me and you and every single person in this world, on the night before he did that, on the night before he went to the cross, he sat in a room with his friends, his best friends. They were called disciples. They were people who followed him all through his ministry. And they shared a meal together, and over this meal, he said to them, guys, you are going to have so many people tugging at you, pulling at you, asking you to say, yes, do this, do this, do this. You are going to be charged with making sure my movement, this movement that I've started and created, continues to go on. And there's going to be a million things to say yes to, and you're going to have to be good at saying no to things that don't matter and yes to the things that really matter. And he said it's going to start with sharing some meals with your friends, making sure you're spending time with them because they're going to help you say no to the things that don't matter. And he said, and then at that moment, he took the bread that was there at the supper, and he held that bread up, and he gave thanks to God for that bread. And he said, thank you, God, for this bread. And he shared this bread with the disciples, with his best friends. He said, this is my body given for you, so that the whole world may know wholeness and goodness, that the whole world may know my purposes of love and goodness for the whole world. So we can focus on the things that really matter. This is my body given for you. And they ate the bread, and they remembered for a moment how good God's love is and was going to be made known to them through Jesus. Then after the supper was over, he gave thanks for the juice. That they had wine, we have juice. He gave thanks for that cup of wine. He said, thank you, God, for this wine. And he shared it with his disciples, and he said, there's going to be a lot of times where we get this wrong, but you are forgiven. He shared the juice with him, and he said, "This is my blood of a new covenant, a new promise, a new purpose for you and for the whole world. I've forgiven everything else that happens so that you can know that you are free to live into my purposes and say yes to the things that really matter." And after they'd eaten and they drank, he looked at his disciples and he said, "There's a world that's distracted and worried and nervous and making bad decisions, and they need you. They need you to live out my purposes, to be my hands and feet in the world and to share with them that I have a new purpose. They need you to do that." And so today, after you've eaten this bread and juice, know that you are charged to go into the world and share the new purpose, the new goodness and love that God has for the people of this world through Jesus Christ. Amen.
Show me your love through the judgment.
God, we just say that this morning. Every burden is laid down today at the foot of the cross. We wear the forgiveness that you've given us like a crown, God, and we just pray that you will use every person in here to shine your light and ignite your change in a world so desperate for it. Amen. Just a couple quick things this morning. If you decided to make a next step in your faith journey this morning, please text the word Horizon to the number 94000 right now. Text that number, and there are some places to mark. I made a decision to follow Jesus for the first time today. I've said yes for the first time in a long time. If you know that your yes means saying yes to some things of serving and impacting our community, of being a part of a small group, there are places on there where you can get plugged in for your next steps on this faith journey. God is moving us all towards the purposes of God, so make sure you take some time and click that on your connection card. The second thing that I want to invite you to do this morning is to give financially. So we feel like God has called us to be people who are generous. In a world where so many folks are holding on so tight to everything they have, Jesus is asking us to be a church that is generous. That's why we over-invest in the ministries that we have with Sheramonte Elementary and with B.T. Washington Elementary School. It's why we spend a lot of time at the Gandy Civic Center. It's why we invest in making sure that we create a worship service and small group opportunities that are meaningful for people. And so we invite you this morning to say yes to giving financially to the ministries of our church. You can do that by following any of the instructions on the slide behind me. If you're online, the Give Today slide should be up. There are three ways you can give: horizontpa.info, the text, and through Venmo. So we invite you to do that. If this is your first time worshiping with us, please feel zero obligation to give. This service is our gift to you so that you can continue to say yes to the things that really matter and no to the things that do not matter anymore. Thank you all so much for being here. Two more quick announcements. First of all, when you leave here, there are going to be some snow cones ready, and our Boy Scout troop is washing cars for a fundraiser. So if you need your car clean, enjoy a snow cone and have your car washed. It will help them pay for the summer camp that they're going to go through this year. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great week. Stand up and sing with us from last song.
Salvation through repentance at the cross on which he died. hearts, shine light, and ignite change. Have a great week, everyone.